they missed my wedding for a spa cruise in Greece. I found out from Instagram my mom holding champagne. No disappointments, just real family. That night, I pulled my name from the family trust, reassigned the property title, and prepped the documents. A week later, my dad showed up, face red, waving a notice. I handed him a folder and said, "You got what you toasted to." The next morning, their lawyer called me. I'll start with the photo. It was posted at 3:47 p.m., the same afternoon I stood at the altar without my parents. My mom, in a white robe, reclined on the deck of a yacht off the coast of Santorini. Her sunglasses were tilted just slightly as she lifted a glass of champagne. The caption, "No disappointments, just real family sparkles. Number blessed. Number Greek cruise." My wedding had started 15 minutes earlier. She wasn't joking. The timestamp, the yacht's location tag, the background, all of it was real. I stood in the venue's courtyard, still in my suit, watching stories roll in one after another, like an ongoing slap in the face. My brothers were there too. Josh, posting videos of grilled octopus and $200 bottles of ouzo. Dylan, who I personally asked to be one of my groomsmen, grinning into the camera with a sparkler in his mouth like he was celebrating the 4th of July. And then there was my dad, stoic, silent, raising his glass in one short clip while someone said off camera, "To freedom." That was it. No explanation. No apology. No phone call. There were over 130 guests at our wedding. My wife's entire extended family came. People she hadn't seen in 10 years, childhood friends, college roommates. Her uncle flew in from Vermont on a red-eye. People cried during our vows. They clapped after the first dance. Her side of the room was full of joy. Mine had 3 empty chairs. The DJ even paused to ask discreetly if we should still do the father, daughter, and mother-son dances. I told him to skip mine. The awkward glances started after that. People kept asking where my parents were, and I stuck to the same answer. They were held up. I kept smiling. I kept drinking. But by 8:00 p.m., I was outside alone, reading their captions and watching their champagne toasts from a continent away. The reason they skipped my wedding? I refused to buy Dylan a brand new Jeep for his 18th birthday. That's it. That was the spark that burned the bridge. I told them no 2 months earlier. He was failing half his classes and had already wrecked my old car once. I didn't see the point, and I figured they'd be upset for a week. Tops. Instead, my mom called me cold. Josh said I was withholding out of jealousy. My dad, who rarely said anything directly, sent me a single email with the subject line, "Family means giving." I didn't respond to that email. I should have. Or maybe not. That night after the wedding, while my wife and I sat on the hotel balcony eating room service fries, I logged into the business portal. Our real estate company, TJD Holdings, had always been a shared dream, at least on paper. But everything we owned, everything we were building, was in my name. I'd taken the loans. I put up the collateral. The original LLC filing was filed with my SSN, my address, my capital. They were part of the name Thomas, Josh, Dylan, but they hadn't put in $1. We had 4 properties in development, 2 under contract, 1 in escrow, and 1 the new mixed-use space in Temecula had just broken ground the week before. It was the crown jewel of the portfolio, and I was done pretending they'd earned it. By midnight, I had removed them from all internal accounts. By 2:00 a.m., I'd locked all shared files and pulled control of the operating agreement. At 5:45 the next morning, I was sitting with coffee, drafting the reassignment of property titles and business interests. 2 days later, I was in the attorney's office, signing final documents. The trust, the one my dad set up for legacy planning, no longer had my name attached, and every asset tied to me was pulled. They still didn't know any of this. A week later, we were back from our short honeymoon. I was unpacking the last bag when someone started banging on the front door like they were trying to break it down. I opened it to find my dad standing there, face blotchy and furious, waving a piece of paper. It looked like a default notice from our main lender. He didn't say much at first, just shouted my name and stepped inside. I didn't even answer. I walked to the counter, pulled out the folder I prepared, and handed it to him. He flipped through the first few pages, his expression shifted. The folder had everything. The transfer of titles, the new LLC paperwork, the notice of removal from all joint ventures, and the trust withdrawal documentation. He looked up. I didn't explain it. I didn't justify anything. I just said, "You got what you toasted to." He stormed out without a word. The next morning, I got a call from a lawyer they'd used once before for estate matters. He was polite, but pushy. Said he was calling on behalf of the family to review recent decisions made regarding mutual holdings. I told him everything was filed, final, and notarized. And then I hung up. By the end of that day, they posted nothing online. No more yacht pictures, no more toasts, no birthday cake for Dylan. Radio silence. But it wasn't over. Not even close. It started small. An email with a subject line that just said, "Concern." It came from Josh. He wrote like he was trying to sound diplomatic, but the tone was obvious. He had just found out about the restructuring and wanted to know if there had been some mistake. I didn't respond. The next day, Dylan sent a group text to me, my wife, and Josh. "Hope we can talk soon. None of this feels fair." I left the group chat. 3 days later, my mom called. First time I'd heard her voice since the wedding. She didn't mention the cruise or the post, didn't say anything about missing the ceremony. Just launched into a rant about how families don't do this to each other and how I was dismantling decades of work out of spite. She said the properties were meant for all of us and asked how I could just erase them from something that belonged to the family. I reminded her who signed every loan, who paid every retainer, funded every escrow, managed every contractor meeting, signed every payroll check. I reminded her that I had watched them toast my absence on Instagram, while my wife's side of the family smiled politely through awkward questions about why half my family didn't bother to show up. She hung up. They stopped trying to reason after that. The lawyer called again, this time with threats. Talked about fraudulent restructuring, implied contracts, breach of fiduciary trust. I told him to read the articles of incorporation. Everything was airtight. There was no family agreement. There was a single registered member on record. Me. That's when the sabotage started. The contractor on our largest project, the one in Temecula, called me out of the blue one morning asking why Dylan was contacting him directly, claiming to be a partner, and trying to change supplier arrangements. A week later, Josh emailed the property manager for our Santa Monica rental portfolio, asking for the last 6 months of rent rolls and expense reports. He claimed I was unreachable, and that he had authority to audit. They were grasping, sloppy, and it didn't. Dylan sent a formal request to the city inspector's office under the business name asking to verify site irregularities. The file was flagged for internal review, but I squashed it before it got traction. A friend in permitting called me the moment he saw the request, said Dylan sounded like a kid trying to play lawyer. I started locking down more. Changed business emails, transferred every internal process to new project management software they had zero access to, closed down the office we used to share, and moved everything to a smaller, private space across town. My wife kept asking if I was okay. I told her yes. But it wasn't true. This wasn't just business. It was decades of manipulation unraveling all at once. The silence after the wedding, the yacht, the fake smiles. It was all part of the same performance they'd perfected for years. I just wasn't clapping anymore. Then one morning, I woke up to find a new Instagram post. Not from my mom this time. From Josh. A black and white photo of the 3 of us as kids. Me, him, Dylan. Caption: "Some brothers don't break blood bonds over money. Some do." The comments were even worse. A parade of people I barely knew chiming in, throwing shade, using words like betrayal, greed, cold-hearted. Nobody mentioned the wedding. Nobody asked where they were that day. But it was fine. I didn't need to explain myself. They toasted to freedom. They got it. And I wasn't finished. 2 weeks later, the notice came. Certified mail. Thick envelope. Letterhead from a different law firm this time. A bigger one. They were officially requesting mediation regarding the division of jointly managed assets and intellectual property. Their argument was that the branding of TJD Holdings, the use of the initials, the family association, constituted a de facto partnership, even without signed documentation. I read it 3 times, not because I didn't understand it, but because I couldn't believe they were doubling down like this. No apology, no accountability, just another attempt to get their hands back on what I built. I called my attorney, forwarded everything, and told him to go scorched earth. No settlements. No compromise. Every email, contract, and transaction over the last 5 years had my name on it. We had screenshots, timestamps, even proof of their total absence from decision-making. While that played out, things got more personal. A longtime client emailed me, confused, said Josh had reached out to clarify some changes in leadership. Another one of our original investors told me Dylan had implied that I was unstable and under pressure, and might be stepping back soon. The game they were playing was amateur level, but dangerous. Reputational attacks, quiet whispers, passive sabotage dressed up as concern. I started making calls before they could. Booked meetings, reassured everyone, showed them the filings and the ownership trail. Most of them were loyal. Some weren't. I lost a deal I'd spent 6 months working on, not because of anything specific they did, but because of the tension their interference created. But the worst came from my mom. She showed up to my office. No warning. I didn't even know how she found the new address. She came in like nothing had happened, like she wasn't the same person who skipped the wedding to drink champagne on a yacht while captioning it, "Real Family." She looked around like she was inspecting the walls, said the place felt small and temporary. Then she asked what it would take to bring things back to the way they were. That sentence, "the way they were," stuck with me. Like the way things were was ever okay. Like decades of their control, their passive judgment, their gaslighting could just be dialed back to default if I signed a few forms and played nice. I told her we were past that point. She asked if I could forgive them. I asked if she even felt sorry. She didn't answer. I walked her out, locked the door after she left, and sat in the dark for a long time after that. The legal pressure kept growing. They tried everything. Emotional manipulation, procedural delays, even offered to restructure ownership to give me a majority if I agreed to restore their shares. I rejected every offer. They started showing up at city council meetings where our firm was listed as a stakeholder, not to support, to cause problems. Josh once accused me of violating zoning restrictions during a public comment session. I had to respond on record. Embarrassing for him. But the damage was the point. Noise, distractions, chaos. All the while, my wife stood by me. She never asked me to reconsider. Never told me to be the bigger person. She saw it clearer than I did. This wasn't a family dispute. It was a power struggle that had finally surfaced now that they'd realized they couldn't control me anymore. One night, sitting on the floor of our living room, she asked me if I missed them. I didn't answer at first. Just kept looking at my phone, scrolling through another one of their new posts, a photo of Josh and Dylan at some gala I wasn't invited to. Caption: "Strong roots, no rot." I told her the truth. I don't miss them. I miss the version of me that didn't know what they really were. 2 days after that gala post, I got a call from a realtor I'd worked with on a few commercial spaces. He asked if I was aware my parents were shopping around our old development blueprints, the ones for the vineyard property we'd once pitched as a luxury retreat outside Ojai. The plans were outdated, and the zoning had changed twice since then. But apparently, they were trying to sell the concept as an approved family legacy project with my name still listed in the deck. They were using my name to bait interest without telling me, without my consent. When the realtor asked if we were still working together, I told him the truth. They had nothing to sell, nothing they were legally part of. I told him if he took it any further with them, I'd pursue a misrepresentation claim. That should have been the end of it. But then I got an email from an unfamiliar address. It was a private message from someone on the HOA board for my parents' neighborhood. Apparently, they had approached the board asking for support letters for a private equity grant, one that required family backing and unity for a cultural heritage proposal. My mom had claimed they were rebuilding a generational project after a brief family disagreement. She was using our family drama as some kind of inspirational narrative, like we were just taking a little detour before reconciling into a heartfelt comeback story. I could feel the manipulation like heat on my neck. But the real punch came later that week. My wife and I were visiting the Temecula property site to check on construction progress. We parked outside the development trailer, walked past the portable fencing, and saw Dylan standing in front of one of the units. He was with a real estate agent, giving a tour. I waited, watched. The moment he noticed me, he froze. The agent turned, confused. Dylan muttered something about partnership rights and handling it internally. I walked up and told the agent to leave. She was clearly embarrassed. Said she thought he was on the title. He wasn't. Never had been. Later that night, I texted Dylan, "This is your only warning. Touch my property again and I press charges." He replied with one line, "You think this ends with a folder and a signature?" But the next week made everything clear. Their intent was never to fix anything. It was about extracting whatever they could before the doors closed for good. I got a forwarded email from my attorney. My parents had applied for an emergency arbitration review, claiming I had unjustly severed financial support obligations and listing, I kid you not, the Jeep for Dylan, an annual family travel allowance I had supposedly cut off, and even holiday maintenance costs. Holiday maintenance costs. They were talking about the lighting company I used to hire every December to put up displays on their house. I'd paid for that 6 years straight without question. Now they were calling it an obligation, as if trimming the hedges and installing a fake sleigh was part of some contract I'd broken. My lawyer almost laughed reading it out loud. But I didn't, because I realized just how entitled they were willing to be. They didn't just want money or assets. They wanted the comfort of their lifestyle maintained at my expense forever. They saw me not as a son, not even as a business partner, but as a resource. That night, I dug up every invoice I could find. Lighting, landscaping, catering, plane tickets for their vacations, even that absurd spa weekend in Sedona I covered last year after Josh accidentally lost his wallet. I sent it all to my attorney. I told him to counter with a reimbursement claim if they pushed the arbitration further. But they didn't. The silence stretched again. I thought maybe it was over. Then I found out what my dad had done with the remaining stake in one of our shared shell companies. The only entity I hadn't shut down yet because it technically had no assets left. He had used it to co-sign a loan on a private condo for himself under my name. He forged the paperwork. The bank called me first. Routine verification. They said they just needed to confirm the cosigner information on the new loan for a 2-bedroom condo in Newport Beach. I laughed at first, thought maybe someone had listed me by mistake. Then they read the document ID. My signature was on it twice, digitally dated 2 weeks earlier. I asked for a copy. When it came through, I stared at it for a full 5 minutes. It looked like my signature, but it wasn't. The font, the angle, just slightly off. Not enough for a casual observer to notice, but enough for me. I hadn't signed a thing in weeks, and I sure as hell didn't co-sign anything for my father. The property was in a luxury complex, private elevator, ocean view, HOA fees higher than my mortgage. And he was approved because, according to the form, his son's firm guaranteed stability of income. It wasn't just fraud. It was stupid fraud, traceable, reckless. I forwarded the documents to my lawyer, then called the bank myself and gave a recorded statement. I didn't even feel angry. I felt insulted. They weren't just trying to take back the business. They were trying to live off its corpse. The bank froze the process immediately. By noon the next day, they'd flagged the application, contacted legal, and sent notice of potential fraud. 2 days later, my dad called me from a blocked number and left a voicemail. 3 minutes long, rambling, defensive. full of lines like, "You know how this game works, and what's mine is yours, what's yours was ours." He actually said that, like it was a family motto. When I didn't respond, he sent an email the next day. This time, it was practically begging. He said they were in a tight spot, that they never meant to make things personal, and that the condo was just meant to bridge the gap while we rebuild trust. He attached a single-page document, a drafted proposal for a temporary profit-sharing reinstatement. He wanted 10% of future revenues from any projects tied to TJD Holdings in exchange for a clean break. I didn't reply. My lawyer filed a fraud complaint with the state the following morning. We attached everything: the forged signatures, the fake guarantor claim, the email trail, the bank's confirmation. That same afternoon, the family group chat I'd muted months ago lit up again. First Dylan, accusing me of destroying Dad's future. Then Josh, sending some half-baked link to a motivational article about forgiveness and high-net-worth families. And finally my mom. A photo of us from 10 years ago. No caption, just silence. I archived the thread. The next week, I held an emergency team meeting at the firm. We rebranded, quietly but officially, dropped the TJD and rolled out a new name, a new logo, and a completely separate public face. The press release was clean and professional. It framed the change as a strategic evolution. Internally, I explained it exactly as it was. We were shedding dead weight. A week later, they retaliated again. This time, it was Dylan on Reddit. He posted in some real estate investing subforum under a burner account, calling me out as a toxic egomaniac who manipulated his own family for financial gain. He dropped just enough identifying details to make it traceable, but vague enough to avoid outright defamation. A few of our smaller investors saw it. That's when I stopped pretending they were going to stop. I hired a security consultant, had all my accounts swept, froze all business credit, created new legal firewalls, and I made one last move. I sold the Santa Monica units quietly, off-market, to a private group. Cash deal. Transferred within a week. None of it went near their names. I knew they'd find out eventually. I wanted them to. 3 days later, I got a text from Josh. Really? Selling off what we built without even telling us? I didn't respond. I forwarded it to my attorney. The next step wasn't legal. It was personal. They showed up at the Santa Monica units 3 days after the sale closed. I got the call from the new owners while I was in a meeting. Josh had brought Dylan, and they were both arguing with the building manager about why their keys didn't work. Claimed there must have been a system error. They tried to act like they were still entitled to walk in and look around. The building manager told them to leave. Josh insisted they had founders' rights. Dylan said something about legacy tenants. When security finally stepped in, they left, but not before taking video of the interaction, probably hoping to spin it online later. They never expected I'd go that far. But here's the thing. They had taken everything too far months ago, long before the yacht, before the missed wedding, before the forged loan documents. This was just the part where the consequences hit. That night, I drove to the site myself. Not because I needed to. I just wanted to see it. The place looked quiet, clean, calm, and for the first time in years, not tethered to a single person who didn't deserve it. I stayed in the car for a while. Then I drove home, logged into the system, and deactivated every login that had ever been connected to them. Vendor accounts, internal dashboards, archived client lists, wiped it all. I had backups, of course, but only I could access them now. The next morning, their lawyer emailed one last time. Subject line: Proposal to reconcile. It was 12 paragraphs long. Flowery language about family unity, shared history, misunderstandings. Somewhere around paragraph 7, he slipped in a suggestion. A phased reintegration of equity shares based on good faith collaboration. I stared at that sentence for a while. Phased reintegration. I replied with one sentence. There's nothing left to reintegrate. Then I blocked the address. After that, The noise finally started to die. The calls stopped. The posts slowed. They kept chirping here and there. Josh posted some vague quotes about loyalty. Dylan tried to launch a YouTube channel about real estate investing that flopped after 2 videos. My mom still hadn't spoken to me directly since she stood in my office and asked what it would take to go back. But I heard they listed their house, quietly. I imagined the money was tighter now that the check stopped coming. I kept moving forward. The business was leaner, faster, more profitable without them. We took on 2 new projects and doubled revenue in 6 months. I hired new people who actually wanted to work, not just benefit. One night, my wife and I were sitting on the patio with a bottle of wine, and she asked if I ever thought they'd come back again. Try something new, I told her. Maybe, then I smiled, but if they do, they'll be knocking on a door that doesn't exist anymore. And that was the truth. There's no comeback for people who toast to your absence and call it peace. They just never thought I'd take them seriously. They never thought I'd walk away for good. But I did. And I took everything with me.